Without truth, there can be no justice.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor.
Speak out. Ask those questions. Demand that truth.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of Truth is Justice. Being labelled a liar in a one-on-one conversation is one thing, but comments made that suggest I'm a liar on a platform that distributes publicly and remains in existence for a considerable period of time is entirely another. Being labelled a liar by a person that at least publicly states they strive for the truth and operates a business around that premise then takes the nature of that statement to a whole nother level. Making statements which label someone a liar, but doing so in a way that tries to distance yourself from the source underlying those statements is simply foolish in the extreme. It signals to me either a complete disregard for the consequences of making such a statement, and make no mistake, there are consequences, or it represents a completely fumbled attempt to reduce ownership of the statement by dragging two other people into the narrative supporting the claim. If you're uncertain what I'm talking about, I'll explain. Last Sunday, Bob committed a significant portion of his show to send a message to his audience about me. The main message Bob sent out to his listeners was that I'm a liar. Now, this statement was tangled up in a web of hearsay which perhaps Bob thought was convenient because, as he makes a specific point of highlighting, neither of the two people who he, in my opinion, recklessly wrapped up in this would be able to speak about it for some period of time. Now, is that a smart approach, or does that in any way reduce Bob's responsibility for the claim? No, not really. In fact, I think it does exactly the opposite. So 2 weeks ago on our podcast, I spoke about the forensic examination which was completed by Mr. Devlin, and specifically I spoke to two entries in the report that had been identified by one of our members, Adam, a few months ago. Those entries, as most of you would now be familiar, were a failed login attempt and a successful login to a laptop computer during the window of time suggested for Jim's death. The importance of those time-stamped events inside the Melgar home cannot be overstated. A 2-hour window for Jim's death has been suggested, and the second one of those login events is almost in the middle of that time frame. Assuming that Jim didn't pass away immediately, and again, it has been suggested that the nature of his injuries meant that he wouldn't have, then if you accept the accuracy of the method used to determine his time of death, the second logging could potentially have happened very close indeed to the attack, which resulted in Jim losing his life. Now, the response from many on Bob's page to that episode was to go on the attack against me and to dispute the statements I made about login entries of the type contained within the report. Now, if you haven't already, I encourage you to listen to our episode 2 weeks ago, episode 15, to understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's worth highlighting that I choose my words very carefully, and I always have. I don't believe for a moment that that characteristic is uniquely attributable to those working in the legal profession, but I do think it is something at the forefront of the mind of anyone working in a field where integrity is absolutely critical. You pick your words carefully, especially on sensitive matters, or matters that have significant consequences. And episode 15 was no exception, and I've always applied that same level of consideration to comments I've put up on our Facebook page and to comments I've replied to in this respect. The claims that I am a liar have taken various forms over the last few weeks, and they've had to be adapted, just like the narrative of this case, as the people making the claims realised that I was actually telling the truth. First, I was labelled a liar for claiming that I had had any communication with Mr. Devlin. And that caught on for a period of time. Actually, some of those at the very heart of the case, those deeply connected with it, joined in the mocking of my suggestion that I'd been in touch with him. And they seemed to strangely take great enjoyment in getting stuck into me. And I say strangely because it's almost like some of them are gaining actual enjoyment from this whole process of investigation. And to me, that's truly bizarre. It's almost like they enjoy the attention of it all, and not the underlying purpose, the acquittal of Sandra, the personal attention received from it. Anyway, then evidence came out that I actually had been communicating with Mr. Devlin, and Liz shared a screenshot on the Facebook page of her direct chat with Ms. Seacrest confirming that I had been in contact with him. So the narrative changed from me being a liar about actually communicating with Mr. Devlin to then me being a liar about what was actually said in those conversations I had with him. And I couldn't understand that. I can't understand people disputing what I was saying when clearly I have the proof of exactly what was said. So even for those that don't know me, surely you would see that to lie about an email communication would be a ridiculously stupid thing to do. As I said, I'm very careful in selecting my words, and this matter was definitely no exception. Why would people seek to challenge something that is so easily verifiable? Well, it is, but that is where Bob took his opportunity to pounce, and that is why Ms. Seacrest and Mr. Devlin being unable to go on the record to support his narrative was so important. See, it's one thing for me to verify the communications, but it's entirely another for Bob to bring on Ms. Seacrest and Mr. Devlin to confirm their accounts of the claims that Bob is making. But challenging the actual contents of the communications with Mr. Devlin and the way I presented that is exactly what Bob went public with. Now, Bob implicates Ms. Seacrest and Mr. Devlin in his web of hearsay that results in the conclusion given that I'm a liar. Now, it's hard to decipher exactly what anyone, so Bob or Ms. Seacrest or Mr. Devlin, actually says I'm lying about. But the fact I am lying is made very clear, entirely unsubstantiated and recklessly offered up to a public audience in a medium that remains available for a long period of time, more or less permanently for those that downloaded the episode where those statements were made rather than streaming them. So during the week, I published the text of my initial email to Mr. Devlin on the 6th of March, and his initial reply to me also on the 6th of March. I was very reluctant to take that step, but I felt, after the statements made by Bob, that it was entirely necessary for me to do so, for two main reasons. First, to provide material to support my assertions that I have not misrepresented Mr. Devlin in any way, and that I have not lied about any aspect of our interactions. Second, to provide material to support my assertions that, in my view, Mr. Devlin is a thorough professional, and that in his first sentence of his first email to me, he outlined his inability to speak directly to the facts of this specific case, a point I was very careful to make many times when referring to this matter. In my view, and I think it's safe to say that this is a view shared by many, individuals operating businesses like Bob's have become increasingly comfortable denigrating individuals who in many cases are unable to respond effectively to those claims for various reasons. These operators do so with a complete disregard for, or perhaps an entire lack of knowledge of there being any consequences. And as I said before, there are consequences, significant consequences. Now, they've directed outrageous attacks at individuals that hold positions where either the ability for them to respond directly is removed, for example, government employees, or where the consequences of responding to these attacks for the individual is such a sustained and vicious campaign of bullying from the followers of these operators that the person who's the target of those attacks simply opts to give up. Now, I can say this. With respect to these claims, I am in a position where I can respond. I can withstand the bullying and the intimidation and the threats. I can confidently, professionally, and thoroughly address these claims. Before we begin with the second part of our group discussion, I wanted to highlight two things that were brought up on our Facebook page during the week. First, one of our members, Fred, made an excellent post regarding the pillow sham in the master bathroom. And I say excellent because I think it highlights a common misconception about the location of the pillow sham with respect to the chair, the sink, and the door of the closet. And it was highlighted in a way that I hadn't seen before. Now, for those not familiar, Bob made statements earlier in the season claiming that the pillow sham, and I'm referring here to the one with the tear, the one found closest to the dining chair and the bathroom closet door. So Bob made statements claiming that the location of that pillow sham in the crime scene photos was consistent with the sham being located underneath the sink and then being bunched up when the dining chair was removed from the door by Herman and pushed aside. Now, it's important to remember that when Bob made those initial statements, it appears that the photos of the master bathroom were not yet available to his audience. So a claim like the one he made can be made somewhat confidently, knowing that, at least in the immediate short term, none of his listeners could actually verify it. So what we actually see is the pillow sham located between the chair and the closet door. It isn't under the sink. It's likely exactly where you would expect to find it if it was underneath the dining chair when Herman removed the chair and pushed it to the side. The photographs are on our website, so go to the photo section and click on the master bathroom. Second, another one of our members, Danielle, published a post that I think raises many questions about the case and the way that Bob has undertaken the so-called reinvestigation. And for those that haven't seen it, please go to our Facebook page and type marijuana into the search bar. I'll also put the document on the show notes linked to this episode on our website. And to summarise, and it's a brilliant post with some very interesting comments following on from it, so I won't be able to do it complete justice here, but on the 28th of November 2012, so a matter of weeks before Jim was murdered, Sandra arranged to purchase 1 ounce of an unknown substance, believed to be marijuana, from a friend, Ms. Rocio Rieb. Now, you'll recognise the name Ms. Rieb. Ms. Rieb is friends with Ms. Tammy Armstrong, and she gave evidence at Sandra's trial. Ms. Rieb notes at trial that the three of them, being Sandra, Tammy and herself, were good friends for about 30 years. And you might ask yourself, and I know I have, why this would be something that Bob wouldn't bring up at all through his reinvestigation. It isn't like buying an ounce of marijuana, and just quickly, I had no idea how much an ounce of marijuana was until I saw someone put a photo up of that amount on the scales. It's definitely not a small amount. So, it isn't like buying an ounce of marijuana is something trivial or something you do every day. I understand Bob not highlighting it to his audience that Sandra bought a bottle of milk several days before the murder, for example, but to not highlight that she arranged to purchase an ounce of marijuana is truly bizarre. If there was a reason to not raise that with his audience, I simply can't see it, other than because it has the potential to paint Sandra in a bad light. But I definitely can't see the reason for Mr. Clemente not being provided with that information. Surely, arranging to purchase a narcotic just weeks before Jim was murdered is relevant information to have when doing the work that Mr. Clemente does. Surely it's relevant information to have at hand when examining the risk profile. Now, of course, I don't know what information Mr. Clemente was provided with by Bob in his summary of the case, but for that narcotic matter to not be raised at all by Mr. Clemente would suggest to me that he wasn't aware of it. It seems that, once again, we have a case of move on, nothing to see here. Now, if you're interested in this case, and if you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to join our Facebook page. The discussions going on there provide an insight into this case that you won't get anywhere else. There is no tiptoeing around topics, there's no treading on eggshells at risk of upsetting someone, and there's no hiding of information that is highly relevant to truly understanding the case, such as the marijuana matter. It's an honest, confronting, upfront, and unapologetic approach to the truth and the matter of justice. Not everyone likes it, and some people get upset, but the truth always has that effect on some people, especially when you don't like or you can't accept the truth. And now, we bring you part 2 of our discussion. It's irreverent, it's politically incorrect, and will likely upset some groups of people. But, like the first part, it's an honest, casual chat amongst a group of people interested in the case. The third and final part will be played next week. I hope you enjoy it.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Ivan, I know you have had this discussion on the page at a point in time, but I'm
people keep saying, prove that there were no burglars in the house.
Negative.
And it's like, no, you don't prove who wasn't there. You prove who was there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who was definitely there?
Sandra.
Sandy.
Spoiler alert! And I mean, it's like, prove that there weren't intruders, prove that there was no seizure, prove that he didn't fight to the death. Come on, people.
Yeah.
It's not the name of the game. The name of the game is to prove something did happen. So,
Like, we can absolutely put Sandy in that house that night. You cannot absolutely put anybody else in that house that
exactly.
night.
And can I ask a question about Sandy's wraparound bruise on her arm? Is it more likely that she got that? Is it more likely she got that bruise from an assailant trying to tie her up while she's unconscious, or is it more likely that she got that while Jim was trying to stop her from stabbing him?
Yeah, those intruders were way too polite to put a bruise on her, tying her up. I mean, they turned the jacuzzi off for her.
They left the light on for her.
The light on.
Come on. And
They let her put on her clothes and the lotion and socks, so she's not uncomfortable.
But yeah, they didn't leave that bruise. They were too nice to her, and they left her alive. They knew she was going to get framed for this shit. Come on.
And one common theme that we always get is like people asking, what are the 3 pieces of evidence that convict Sandra of guilt? Or like, where's the smoking gun? And the thing about circumstantial cases is you need to have an analytic, holistic view of the thing. The thing about circumstantial evidence, every piece of circumstantial evidence on its own is not enough to prove anything. But as a whole, when you have 15, 20, 25 things all aligning to tell a story, if you can make them fit into one story, it's really hard. You can see people on our page trying to fit everything into a coherent narrative. It's anything but coherent. There wasn't a single coherent narrative on our page trying to explain away all the evidence. And people telling me that it's a far-fetched that Sandy stabbed Jim and then just tied herself up and went into the closet. No, the investigators replicated herself tying, closing the doors of the closet in a matter of minutes. They were so professional and experienced that they came in and they were like, oh, I think I know how she could have done it. And people are attacking them for it. They're like, oh, they figured it out. Yes, it's their job, and they did a good one.
They were in
No, and if they could replicate it so fast, it's because it has been done before.
Yes.
Probably.
And how is that scenario less believable than 4 intruders came into the house, killed Jamie, put Sandy in a closet, tied up and barricaded, left no evidence behind, took nothing, and the neighbor working in his garage didn't see or hear anything? How is that more believable?
Because it goes against Sandy, and anything that goes against Sandy, you better just
Is
shut up
unbelievable.
about, because Sandy is a freaking saint, and she's way too frail. Like, when I first heard that this frail woman, I was expecting to, like, look at the picture of this, like, damn, I don't know, hobbit or something. Well, I mean, she was a hobbit, but either way. But, I mean, seriously, like, I expected to see, like, this frail old lady who just could barely move, and then it's like, no, you don't look like that.
You mean she could barely tube?
That, too.
I was just going to say, she did go water tubing,
Jesus.
The thing is that the people that believe in her innocence, they have it like a little bit tough as well, because how are you going to argue when you have the whole family in the page, when you have Liz refuting everything you say, and even as an admin or as a moderator, it's difficult to really talk about it, and she doesn't even call her.
What do you think? They say, so Sandy went into prison, and Liz was saying that they wouldn't give Sandra her anti-seizure meds.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yes.
And
Torture her, Chinese water torture and everything.
Her lawyers, listen, same thing with Damien Eccles. He was dying. His eyesight was failing. He had no teeth. Come on. If that was happening, all her lawyers would have to do is start a big, huge thing with the ACLU about her civil liberties not being protected. You cannot keep someone's medicine from them in prison. Those people would be going insane. You can sue. You can start all kinds of noise about it. Go to the press. That's not happening.
Even if they did, though, and her seizures had been getting as bad as she claimed while she was on meds, what's the likelihood that she would have only had one in a whole year not being on her meds at all?
Yeah. No.
And it's an extremely stressful environment, different environment than her home and everything, and only one. And another thing that you said, Nicole, about the whole thing appealing and the lawyers going after them for her civil liberties and everything. It's not like Sandy comes from what you call it, risky or at-risk demographics. She's not some. She's not a minority that's, she's like a white middle-aged, middle-class woman with, she has access to good lawyers. Mm-hmm. She has access to everything. It's just not something that happens. She's not like isolated from the world, just like, a poor youth from some poor suburb, I mean, poor hood or whatever, that got into trouble and is now being tortured in prison, basically. No, she's a middle-aged, middle-class white woman in prison. Okay, white or Latino, I don't know what she identifies as.
And that's why she gets documentaries on TV and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, she is privileged. She has some kind of privilege, so she should be.
I'm just saying she's not a vulnerable demographic. That's it. She's not.
Yes.
You know what? I want to see proof of that. They can get her records. Bullshit. Her lawyers can get her records. I want to see proof of that she didn't get her meds for that long. Until I see it documented, I don't believe it.
It's too much of a woe is me narrative. I just can't stand it. Woe is me. They did, and they overdid it. Honestly, they overdid it the same way Sandy overdid the staging. She was like damned if she did, damned if she didn't with the chair. Because if she didn't do it with the chair, it wouldn't be believable. They would just say, "Oh, you could have just laid on the floor and waited for everybody. You could just got up and screamed from the windows for somebody to help you." She had to have been barricaded in or incapacitated in another way. But then again, have you ever heard of anybody barricading anybody with a chair inside their own house? Not kidnapping somebody and putting them in a closet? No, barricading why?
And there's no point in barricading after you've tied them up and they're unconscious.
Absolutely. And those people couldn't have known, those people, quote unquote, intruders, couldn't have known that her family was coming over, and they could have expected that she was going to die of starvation, of dehydration, just being alone in the house. Why not just stab her to death?
Can I jump in real quick and say something?
Please.
So we were just talking about putting the chair up against the closet door and tying yourself up and really overselling the idea that there were intruders, and Sandra is as much a victim as Jim was. And I just want to highlight in her interview with the police officers at the station, when they start really focusing in on her and she realizes it, Carazal says, "Do you understand? You're in the house and your husband's in the house and your husband's," and she says, I know that. And
I know.
Carazal says, "So," and Sandra says, "I know how it looks, but I was also tied up." And that was her get out of jail free card. Yeah. Tying herself up and putting that chair in front of the closet. She figured that's all she had to do, and she would be able to go on with her life and get her beach house and live her dreams. But it didn't work out.
Yeah, the fact that she felt the need to how I look at it, mostly when people lie about the things they did, usually they make up excuses. Oh, I couldn't have done that. I was doing something else, this or that.
An excuse, right?
Yes, you want an excuse. And people who are actually innocent, they don't make excuses. They know they didn't do it. They don't.
Right.
It's like, who was it? Was it Tim or somebody who said the other day, when you're guilty, you have to look for the needle in the. Was it Ryan? Ryan? Yeah.
Ryan Cross.
Ryan Krauss, yeah.
It was Ryan
When you're
Cross.
guilty, you have to look for the needle in a haystack. When you're innocent, you just have to point to the haystack, you know. And that's the thing. And Sandra was looking for that needle really desperately, and she was getting annoyed. She was. I think what happened is like she got overly enthusiastic once the family came in, and she saw that they were buying her story, and she got overly confident, not thinking about the fact that the police are going to come in without a bias, because they're not going to be as biased as her family, and they're going to look for the truth. And she got annoyed once she started figuring out that they're actually suspecting heavily suspecting her story, and she got really annoyed and started making excuses. Yeah, I know, but I was tied up.
She got upset with the cops as well, because when she was saying that she saw the chair was propped up or something, and you could tell she was frustrated.
She started
because she was
stuttering.
Yeah. She felt she was messing it up. She started getting too confident, I think. She started getting too confident that they were believing her, and then they weren't.
I mean, why
And
she?
I don't believe.
I think I need an attorney. Why didn't she just say it from the get-go?
I want an attorney.
Yeah, I want an attorney. Yes.
You can sit there and not answer a single question, and the only thing out of your mouth should be attorney. That's it. Like, I'm not talking until you get one here, and just keep saying it over and over and over again. Like, she talked. It's her own fault.
Yeah.
And back to the chair. I'm sorry, I don't believe that bullshit that Herman told her there was a chair there.
No.
I don't believe that.
No.
Where would that come up? When would that come up? Like, they were just, like, chatting?
Oh, when he was trying to get her out, supposedly, Herman said, I'm trying to move this chair.
Yeah, trying to move the chair that he just, like, kicked out of the way or whatever. It's not like it was...
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
I'm sorry, I don't believe that.
Yeah, right.
No.
That was never, ever brought up until it was mentioned about Sandy knowing about that chair in front of the goddamn door.
And you knew that Seacrest knew it was a huge deal when he got William Black to do the experiment, if he could see the goddamn chair under the door. Seacrest knew it was a big deal. Once he saw that tape, he was like,
was gonna be a problem.
Oh, it's gonna be a huge red flag. We need mitigating measures. And so William Black spent his $10,000 looking under a door
and burning a candle.
Burning candles and watching Cool Whip break down, or rather not break down, and
And also, there was something I wanted to go back to.
The whole staging goes one way and the other. First, it wasn't sophisticated, and then, yes, it was sophisticated, and then it's not sophisticated anymore, depending on the area you're watching. And
that's true.
And the thing is that, like Celestina Rossi said, she's an expert. She said this staging doesn't make sense. I mean, yes, the drawers were pulled out, but nothing was ransacked. I mean, there was no. Everything was too much staged.
Yeah, everything looked like it needed to scream that there was a burglar. So she overdid even that. She she opened the drawers, emptied the purse, ransacked that. You know, it's like, why didn't she just do something simpler? You know, just the purses and a few drawers.
And yet, the only thing damaged in the entire house was Jim.
Yeah.
I mean, and that just says to me that's a homeowner is doing this. A homeowner doesn't really want to ruin or trash anything of value in their house. No furniture, no floors, no doors. But an intruder doesn't care.
Nope.
Exactly.
And they didn't know there was intruders. They didn't know that somebody else wasn't coming in that house in the next hour or two.
Well,
they had no idea that nobody else lived there.
And I'm not saying, okay, I should say, I could probably say this fairly confidently. We're not saying that the house should be flipped upside down and the mattresses should be off of the bed and, you know, curtains tore down, whatever. But it just didn't look authentic. And the detectives, they noticed it right away. How many times do you think they've been on burglaries or home invasions where they've seen things like this that was authentic, and they come in here and they notice, okay, something doesn't smell right here. What's going on?
And
how are we the ones that are going to say they don't know what the hell they're doing? Do you know what I mean?
An interesting parallel with that would be when kid is being like physically abused in a house and having bruises and stuff like that, and going to the ER, and then the dad or the mom saying, "Oh, he fell down." You have trained medical professionals that can tell if the bruising came from like hitting or falling down a flight of stairs, you know?
I can tell.
Yeah, and nobody would ever tell you, Nicole, like, "Oh no, you have to trust the parent. He says he fell down." How do you know it wasn't from stairs? You just do. You saw enough times what it looks like when a kid falls off a bike and what it looks like when a kid got smacked on the head, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the thing is that it's a conspiracy. So everybody was wrong, is wrong, except Sandy and company.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, I don't have to be able to prove it or anything. I am a mandated reporter, and if I think that a kid has been being abused, all I have to do is
You
call
just
him.
report it.
I don't have to defend myself. Why?
Which is why you're an expert, and you know, and the fact that you have the power just proves that you're competent enough to make that call. And why are the other experts not treated the way they should be? They're experts in their field. Why are random people on Facebook thinking they know the job of other people better than the people who do that job? As you said, Nicole, on the page, you would never tell a plumber or a carpenter how to do their job. They know how to do their job.
But they went to Google University.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and everybody knows everybody's credentials. Everybody that has their hands on the transcripts and has looked at the CVs of all the experts, they know their credentials, and they know they're capable of stating an opinion. Why is the opinion of the Army more important than the opinion of the experts?
It's not just important. It's exactly what I wrote about Bob being Mr. Inspector Gadget, running all over God's creation, throwing turtles into, but whatever, holding turtles, throwing pigs into the bayou, doing his little experiments. He could actually go to school and try to go to be in the FBI and actually be as important as
why not? People do it all the time.
So could any of these people in the Army, if they wanted to do it in real life, but they don't, because they just do it on the internet.
They want a shortcut. They just want a shortcut.
Last night I was just telling my husband that the first 9 pages of Rossi's testimony cover her credentials. Not the first 9 pages.
I know.
Getting off podcast
it's
too.
Impressive. It's impressive. It's really impressive. And I mean, you just can't rebuke that. I mean, I don't think you will find someone as prepared as she is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And
so,
something
that is how. I mean, that is very telling, actually, because they are scared of experience. They are scared of what she has to say. Yeah. Why? Why? If you're telling the truth, if you say you're telling the truth, why are you scared that the expert is saying otherwise? It's very telling.
I just wanted to touch on a few things. I know this is not specifically case related. This is Bob Ruff and quote unquote the Army related. The way they made their group structure is really concerning to me, because you can see in Bob's social media posts that he's posting things like my tribe and the army and stuff like that. It's a classic example of depersonalization of his members. It's like we're all the same, we're all wearing gray, we're all the army, we're, you know, and it's really cult-like, and they call him Daddy, Big Daddy Ruff and stuff like that. It's like great leader. It's like the great leader. Kim Jong-un, you know, it's like it's really cultish, and once you make a group like that, which has strong intergroup cohesiveness, you know, they're really cohesive. As soon as you have dissenting opinions, they have to be removed. They have to be removed because everybody pulled in their sense of worth on a huge pile of group worth. And once if by any chance anybody who's a hardcore fan of Bob's would at this point say, "Oh, I think Sandy did it," he would have to go back and rethink his actions for the past like 6 months, and he's too invested in the fact that she's innocent, and it's now a sunk cost fallacy. You know, it's like now he's losing too much by accepting that he was wrong, he, she, or whatever. You know, and so it's really concerning to me because I really feel like there's actually I saw a couple of people say like, "I'm a doctor." There was this one guy messaging me. He's a PhD in criminal investigations and stuff like that. I'm like, how does it happen? And it reminds me of Jonestown. You know, there were a lot of smart, educated people, and it's not about education. It's not about intelligence. It's about something else. It runs through emotions, which is like the older part of the brain and the more powerful part of the brain. And once you invest yourself so much in the emotional part of the case, and that's why a lot of people say, "I feel she's innocent. I feel they should have done more. I feel this and that." This is not about feelings. This is about a rational thought, and you have to shut off your feelings and see what's out there. So I just wanted to get that out there because it's one of the most concerning parts, and the part that really fascinates me, because honestly I will repeat myself from the beginning, this case as a case is boring. It's really straightforward and it's boring. It's boring.
That's the problem Sam ran into with the IT stuff. The IT people he spoke to wouldn't come on the podcast because they didn't want to deal with Bob and the quote-unquote
army.
And who would blame them?
I don't.
What's there to be gained? And even for Mr. Devlin, really, what's there to be gained? Because if he came out and said, you know, if he agreed to, you know, to come onto the podcast, something, if he agreed to do that, all they're going to say is they'll then attack him for why did you lie? Why did you lie in your testimony? Why did you? So they still won't confront the main issue of those logins. They'll just be of the view that something's happened to change his mind, and then he's corrupt, and that. So there's nothing to be gained. Nothing.
Right.
They're the approach is just unbelievable. It's ridiculous. They just can't see how blinded they are by it all, and I think they're just actually making themselves look really silly now. Like it's become such a, you know, it needs to be such a massive conspiracy, and it needs so many people to be so against Sandra, and it needs so many things to go the right way for her, and so many coincidences to happen at the one time.
And you can see with this, you know, with the screenshots and everything, it's the same people that are talking. Nobody engages anymore because people are starting to really have doubts about it. So it's always the same people, and they're talking and they're saying the same things, and they're, you know, what Sam said, nothing to see here.
I mean, it's made them look stupid. Like the level that they've gone to fight back against this is so ridiculous. I mean, they look ridiculous. They look ridiculous. I mean, people would look at it and go, I mean, why don't you at least just consider for a minute that it's true and try and figure out how to deal with it instead of just attacking me and saying I'm lying, and then taking those few questions at the trial when they don't believe anyone else. It's so weird.
Well, there are already a couple who have questioned Jessa and Nick's, you know, undue influence by us because they creeped her friend list.
We are such masterminds. I mean, it's incredible. We have such an influence on people. God, I wish I had it like in my house or something like that.
Can we say something that addresses Jim, and just to kind of
like here's the thing to him.
Yeah, here's the thing. I feel like our little group, really, we are interested in the truth, but everybody is wanting to paint us as trying to victimize Sandra and Liz again. And I don't know, we don't really get a chance often to stand up for ourselves or just say we're not interested in making Sandra more guilty or trying to make Liz's life harder. I was listening to Ryan Krause's recent episode yesterday about the Melgar case, and he did a fantastic job of getting inside Jim's head, basically, when the moment Jim was killed. And it almost had me in tears because I really believe that Ryan got to the heart of what happened in that moment, and that Jim truly loved Sandra. She took him by surprise. She killed him because she didn't want him in her life anymore. And now she has a problem. She's in prison, and her and her family, her friends, her loved ones, they don't believe she did it, and they would love nothing better than for this all to go away, for her to be out and free, and for everyone to carry on. But I can't stop thinking about Jim. And I've had people say to me, if you knew Jim, you would know that he would not want Sandra in prison. And that may be true. In fact, it probably is, because I don't think he fought her for his life because he loved her. Basically, he died because he loved her and he didn't want to hurt her.
Yeah.
But does that mean that we should throw away the justice and say the victim wouldn't have wanted this, so let's just let her out of prison? And that brings huge questions into justice and why we put anybody in prison, which is way beyond what we're talking about. But I think that I just want to say something about him, about Jim. He was a loving man. He was a very good husband. And he tried his best to be a good father. And he was killed. And no one has the right to take anyone else's life away like that. So I just wanted to say that. If anybody else wants to say anything about Jim as well.
By all accounts, he was a good guy, and he loved Sandra. He took care of her as his best he could. He was trying to better himself. He was trying to get healthier. He was trying to follow his, religious beliefs more firmly, and he was just trying to be the best person he could be. And I think that it is tragic and heartbreaking that at this point in his life, when things were coming together for him personally, his life was brutally taken. And I think that fact is lost a lot in the discussions, and people should remember that this poor man is no longer here, and it should be about having justice for the loss of his life and nothing else.
I also want to say something, and I think I wrote it in the page before, that a lot of people think that we are happy that she's in prison, that we take some kind of joy of making her guilty. We don't. It's a horrible crime. I don't know who said that, but nobody wins here. And it makes me also remember one of the episodes where Bob was trashing Colleen Barnett and everybody else. I remember he said that Colleen or Maurice Carpenter, I don't remember which one, took from Jim the most important thing from him, that was his family. But I think Sandra took the most important thing from him, that was his life.
Yep.
And that's even worse, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so
I just want to say that, the courts in appeals and, they, in general, they do not do anything on emotion. It's just all based on facts and procedure, and everything is just very much just matter of fact. So hopefully that since they've decided to accept this appeal of hers, even though I think it's still over the limit of words, but much lower, and that just means that they're going to read it. Now the state has to reply. Hopefully they'll reply really well and shoot holes in everything that's in it, and they will not grant her an appeal, and she'll just stay where she is. I mean, she only got I shouldn't say only, but she got 27 years, correct?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
And she only has to do, what, like 70% of that? 80?
Something like that. Something like that.
So, I mean, I don't know. She probably could have just pled it down to begin with.
That's not
if
that
she
long.
had
admitted to it.
I mean, it takes so long to go through all of these appeals. The Supreme Court is not going to take Adnan's case. They're not going to take Sandy's. It wouldn't even go that far. They only take like 1% of cases. They don't have enough time. And I don't know. I don't see that working. I don't see that there's anything. He didn't even raise certain things in the trial so that he could put them in an appeal. I don't even know why she's still with him.
Thank you.